President Trump's border czar, Tom Homan, and other officials oversaw immigration enforcement efforts in Chicago on Sunday as ICE officials announced 956 arrests in one day on Sunday. In comparison, an ICE report shows an average number of daily arrests of non-citizens with criminal convictions or pending charges in the previous fiscal year that ended September 30th was 310.7. So that's 956 compared to 310. Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson said on X the city's police were not involved in federal enforcement efforts and emphasized that Chicagoans should know their constitutional rights. He also attached a statement in both English and Spanish reading, "There have been confirmed reports of ICE enforcement activity in Chicago today, Sunday, January 26th. Per city code, Chicago police were not involved in this immigration enforcement activity. My team and I are in close communication with city officials, including the CPD. It is imperative that all Chicagoans know their constitutional rights and share the Know Your Rights guidance with their neighbors and community." Homan told ABC this week, earlier on Sunday, that arrest and deportation numbers would steadily increase, adding, "Right now, it's concentrating on public safety threats, national security threats. That is a smaller population." And we also have some reporting from CNN. President Donald Trump's immigration officials have been instructed to dress for the cameras, according to sources who told CNN that every participant must wear raid jackets to maximize media attention on the mass deportation efforts. Trump officials began the promised mass deportations last week, starting with ostentatious deportation flights using military aircraft. And according to CNN correspondent Josh Campbell, they're under orders to take maximum advantage of media coverage as a nationwide blitz begins. Teams across the country have been given various quotas for the number of so-called high-profile immigration raids they should conduct each month, one source said. So CNN breaks down how this is actually different than the Biden administration. So take a look at this.
How do you understand how this is different from what had previously been going on under the Biden administration?
Right. So, I mean, perhaps the clearest cut case as to, or the earliest example of kind of the playing to the camera aspect of all of this was when they utilized those military planes to try to send some of these migrants back to South America rather than just a regular civilian passenger sort of airline that are typically used. And so, if anything, it fits into this larger dynamic that Trump is certainly central to, which is straight out of central casting, looking for members of his cabinet that look good on TV, playing to the camera when it comes to his own experiences in reality television.
So it's not just Border Control and ICE that have been taking part in the deportations. Of all people, Dr. Phil has been very present as well. Yes, Dr. Phil. It's a pretty high-risk mission that we're going on, Dr. Phil said in one clip before heading out into the field. "You've never been deported before?" Dr. Phil asked the man. And the guy said, "You're Dr. Phil?" The man replied, "You look like Dr. Phil." And Homan directed his agents, "Let's take him in, process, and lock him up," as Dr. Phil and crew packed up and moved on to the next raid. I don't know why Dr. Phil is involved in any of this. An arrest has been made in the fatal shooting of a US Border Patrol agent during a traffic stop in Vermont also. According to the FBI, Teresa Youngblood, 21, of Washington State, was arrested on Friday and charged with assault on a federal law enforcement officer, according to a statement from the FBI. Investigators have been conducting periodic surveillance on Youngblood and Felix Bockholt, a German national who was killed during the shooting after they were reported as suspicious by someone who was staying at the same hotel as the pair, according to court records. And on Monday, the day of the fatal shooting, the two were being observed by law enforcement in the parking lot of a Walmart nearby, prosecutors said. Investigators observed Bockholt coming out of the store with rolls of aluminum foil that he then used to wrap cell phones, they said. The stop was initiated by Border Patrol agents under the pretext of an immigration violation, according to court records. And between 3 p.m. and 3:15 p.m., agents reported gunshots from the scene, according to the affidavit. So, Jackson, there's been so much talk about Trump revoking birthright citizenship, talk surrounding whether or not he can actually do that with just an executive order. Everyone says no. Constitutional law says no, he can't do that. The Constitution remains unchanged as far as birthright citizenship goes, but this is kind of separate from that, right? This is just deportations of people who they're deeming to be illegal or whatever. I don't know how they're actually doing their due diligence. But either way, while people are freaking out about birthright citizenship and what those implications could possibly be, in the meantime, ICE is well on its way to rounding people up, potentially deporting them. We don't really know what's going to come from all these raids, but there have been reports of ICE officers being spotted in various parts of various cities. Here in Houston, I know that they've been spotted around some parts of town that are known to house more immigrant populations. So, what do you have to say on this, Jackson?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's not really likely that Trump can just revoke birthright citizenship via executive order. But the important thing is that they're trying to do so. Like this. So, how can we take away people's birthright citizenship however we can, as quickly and covertly as possible? Just kind of etching away at that wound as much.
Mhm.
One of the things that I do want to point out, just in terms of like a Republican administration and a Democratic administration when it comes to our immigration system, is that Democrats are constantly throwing people out of the country too. Like the notion that when a Democrat's in power, people are just flooding in here and no one's doing anything about it, obviously is not true. One of Obama's nicknames was the deporter in chief. One of the bigger differences though is that Republicans, well, they have less respect for it. It's on the forefront of the Republican agenda. So just get the immigrants out of here. Whereas Democrats will kind of more silently do that. But you got Dr. Phil in the mix. They're making a spectacle out of this. So ultimately, we're going to have to see, like, are there any differences in the numbers of people who are actually getting kicked out versus Democrats? Because again, Democratic administrations kick people out all the time too. But are they, Republicans are more set to go into schools and go into people's jobs and go into churches and take people. And of course, they're going to get it all on camera so that even if they don't kick out all these millions of people that they promised to do, which would tank the economy, they could at least look like they're doing it. And that's all that the base is going to want. So either way, this environment is worse for immigrants because the culture now is that, oh, they just shouldn't be here. Get them out of here right now. So we're only 1 week and a day in. I think that it's definitely going to ramp up.
Yeah, it's the spectacle of it all, right? It's the culture of fear surrounding immigrants and immigration into this country. And you're absolutely right. The Democrats, and a lot of people said this during the election too, the Democrats, they have done so much more than they got credit for during the Biden administration. And the reason why they didn't get credit for it is because they didn't make such a spectacle about it, right? So people weren't hearing about all these things that they were doing. People didn't see all these things that they were doing. The numbers were there, but people weren't going to look up those numbers. So, and we saw from the report, I believe it was from CNN, where they were saying, you know, be camera ready. This is going to be on camera. They recruited Dr. Phil of thanks Oprah, by the way, for that guy. But,
Right.
oh God. But between all of that, Trump has to at least be perceived as some guy who is delivering on his campaign promises. He's doing this. It's a really easy win for him. His people are going to see it. They love the spectacle. They love to see families being torn apart. We have pundits who have said so much on camera, live, to their audiences, and they're not worried about families being torn apart, things like that, things that Democrats typically care about, because all they care about is the principle of the matter. You're not supposed to be here. You got to get out. You were never supposed to be here in the first place, so you got to go now, right? And so much of politics in today's world is about that spectacle. It's about the perception of what's happening versus what is actually happening. And since we're all so stuck on our phones and stuck to the news and all that, we're not even looking outside into the world. We're not even looking to see how our lives are actually being affected by things like, say, illegal immigration. We're watching the news and we're being told that this is a problem, and they like to see that Trump is taking care of problems. So, any final thoughts before we go to our first break?
Yeah, and there's a huge conflict of interest on the right now, where the billionaire class, they want either undocumented immigrants to work the lower labor cost jobs, like agricultural service stuff like that, And then the H-1B1, we saw that spat with Elon Musk and a lot of big portions of MAGA. So there is a big conflict of interest between these people. So I mean, we're only a week in. You know, the Donald Trump's first day, he was like, "Oh, we gonna raise y'all prescription drug prices," and already failing on everything. The Ukraine-Russia conflict still going on. It's been longer than 24 hours. So I think we're in for a really big mess. But ultimately, the billionaire class, corporate America, doesn't want all these immigrants to be kicked out.
Mhm.
So
That is an excellent point. By the way, thank you for the reminder that it has been longer than 24 hours and Trump
yes.
has not ended the war in Ukraine. So thank you for that.